Palestinian Authority declared that an offense to the Palestinian people. That's the story right there. If
Wow,
you're
that's good
not
for you.
willing to lie, if you're not willing to rewrite reality, you're not with the Palestinian cause. In order to be with the Palestinian cause, you have to be willing to lie and slander the Jews. And
Um,
that's what we see news agencies doing every day.
and a lot of Jews are joining that too.
I like to comment on that
Yeah.
the notion
Yeah.
that all Jews are intelligent is an anti Semitic trope.
Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Golda's Girls. My name is Carla van Welsum. My co-host for today is Rachel Rappaport. And our special guest is Rabbi Menken. And we are so delighted to have you today because you have a wonderful message to share. To our listeners or our viewers, I would like to say please subscribe to us to support us because we have like 91% of returning viewers, which is very high. But a lot of people seem not to be able to find the button how to subscribe. It's very easy, so please do so. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, so Rabbi Yaakov Menken earned a BSc, which is a Bachelor of Science and Engineering degree in computer science from Princeton University before pursuing rabbinic studies at schools in both the United States and Jerusalem. He is the author of the Everything Torah book, an introduction to basic Judaism and Torah thought. Rabbi, you've appeared on numerous national TV networks, and we are thrilled to have you here. And thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking you about the Coalition for Jewish Values. You're the executive vice president of this organization. And can you please tell us what exactly it is and why does it exist?
So, Coalition for Jewish Values was founded in 2017. You may remember during the beginning of the first Trump administration, there was a lot of talk about anti Semitism, primarily to accuse the president, who did any number of pro Israel and pro Jewish things during his first term, as somehow being an anti Semite, and people worked for him being an anti Semite. It was a group of other rabbis who recognized, this is turning this is just offending conservatives who are otherwise allied with the Jewish community and friendly towards the Jewish community. Why is there nobody speaking out from the Jewish community saying, well, thank you, Mr. Trump, and we are actually, there's such a thing as being Jewish and being pro traditional biblical values. So that's where the organization, I think, got its start. It may be that there was that political motivation a little bit in recognizing that there was something going on, but it's really about traditional values across the board that no one was promoting them in the name of the Jews. And that's actually very damaging to the Jewish community.
Yeah, that makes totally sense. Wow. And who do you represent? Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Well, we represent formally 2,500 rabbis across the country who've signed up to say, I'm part of Coalition for Jewish Values. But when you think about what we say, the reason why we so quickly attracted 2,500 rabbis is that there are certain things that to be a traditional rabbi, you kind of have to believe. You know this to be true because you open Tanakh, the Hebrew, the Torah, the Bible. You've read these things, you know what they stand for, you know what you have to believe. So in reality, we're just representing, as I say to any new rabbi thinking about joining us, I said, if I say something that you disagree with, we're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed.
So, what issues exactly do you cover?
So we cover we define it in three general categories. One is human rights, which of course includes anti-Semitism. We talk about family values, which includes the value of human life, what a marriage is, what gender is, all of those sorts of things. And of course, we care about religious liberty because our ability to function as a Jewish community depends upon the right of every religious faith in this country to practice accordingly. If we want to
Yeah.
have rights, we have to protect it for everybody.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that? And maybe about the marriage values and the other values, to a bit more for our listeners.
Well, which one would you like to hear about first? Because
Whatever
there's
you like to
so much to
choose.
be said in
I
those.
know, I
You,
know. When I heard the title, Coalition of Jewish Values, I'm like, oh, that's large. So
it
maybe
is
you,
large,
so
but
maybe you, sorry, yeah, maybe you choose something that comes up like this.
well, I was told by another leading women's organization, a conservative women's, obviously, as you'll hear in a moment, um, that we are the only national Jewish organization fighting to keep men out of women's sports.
Well, that's
And
interesting.
and private spaces, which I find a stunning thing because
Yeah.
it seems like such a plain and obvious thing that
Yeah,
Title IX was created to give women the ability to compete with other women, that it was fundamentally unfair to
yeah,
expect them to
yeah,
compete with
yeah,
biological men.
yeah,
And then now we have this movement to say that biological men are actually women if they think they are,
yeah,
and therefore should have the right to compete against biological women. That's extremely unfair. The
yeah,
whole point. Now, let me be honest here. I mean, look, you're looking at me. Even when I was in my late teens and 20s, there were women who had no problem beating me at almost any sport you can name. But at the same time, the top 10% of male athletes have an advantage that women will never equal, and that is simply because of testosterone.
yeah,
It is already on the books that a woman who takes testosterone supplements is banned for life from sports.
yeah,
And why is that? Precisely because it abuses the woman's body to take that testosterone. Well, so now you have a man who naturally has that testosterone advantage. If you allow him to compete against biological women, you probably don't even hold the race. Just hand him the trophy and be done with it. I mean,
yeah,
it defeats the entire purpose.
yeah,
So there you got one issue. The value of human life. People talk a lot more about abortion than about euthanasia, but both actually matter a lot under Jewish law. To hasten death, to not value human life as a precious thing, even in the womb, is very against our values, our traditional values. Of course, you cannot open Tanakh without knowing how many genders there are. So there, which takes us back to that other question. Um, in the area of religious liberty, we care about. There's been a number of cases actually where Christian organizations that work exclusively with other Christians, for example, in the field of foster care, states work with foster care agencies of all kind across the state. Many of those are religiously motivated. There are certain states, kind of obvious in this country, there are going to be certain states where only Christian organizations exist outside of what the state does itself. That doesn't mean it's discriminatory. It just means it's part of their faith to work with other people in the same religion because it's part of their evangelical mission.
yeah,
Okay, that's fine. We need the right for a Jewish family, for a Jewish child who needs foster care to be placed in a Jewish home, for a child needing adoption to be placed with a Jewish family.
yes,
We're not going to have that right if we allow other people who are actually Jewish in some of these cases to challenge the ability of Christians to work exclusively with Christians in foster care. That's just how the system works. If we want our religious liberty, they have to have it too. And obviously, then there's the issue in human rights, anti Semitism. It's very straightforward. The unique hatred of the Jews is something that persists until today. It goes by the name of Palestine and Palestinian liberation and being anti Israel. Strangely enough, nobody's anti North Korea or anti
yeah.
Iran or
We
anti
missed that.
Cuba or anti Russia. They're only anti Israel. Yeah, but that's only political and they're only against the. Yeah, okay.
Really,
We've heard this before.
yeah,
You find a new way to demonize the Jews and excuse them being killed.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm shocked to hear actually that your organization is the only one that stands up for the women's sports. There is for the inequality with that situation. I think there is such a fear in so many people and organizations too to speak out for what they believe in, out of fear to be canceled or getting backlash.
Right.
And it's unbelievable, to my opinion, how where we are today. And it's not
You
only in
know,
America; it's also in Europe. I'm from originally from Europe. I hear the same sounds there from my friends. Yeah.
it really says something that we're supposed to be the ones regarded as, patriarchal. We don't care about women. It's just a bunch of rabbis who are all male. And meanwhile, all of the Jewish women's organizations in this country, from Hadassah to the the National Council of Jewish Women, they're all about how men who think they're women actually are and should have the ability to compete against them. It's not only, by the way, as much as we talk about sports, think about other women's private spaces.
Hmm.
There are stores certainly in the Orthodox community, there are stores in which men are just simply not welcome to enter because they sell women's clothing. Women are trying on the clothing. Men shouldn't be there, period. So I don't have the right to be there. No man should have the right to be there, regardless of what he considers himself to be. Similarly, and again, these are not, I mean, obviously in synagogues they make an exception, but they're pushing this agenda on us that affects all sorts of public spaces, public accommodations, according to something that the Congress called the Equality Act, strangely enough.
That's
A
ironic.
wedding held in a public hotel ballroom where they're divided by gender. And no, you don't get to choose which gender you are when you walk in because it's a traditional Jewish wedding. Well, according to that law that they tried to pass, it was going to be listed as a bias crime. And the only exception would be, oh, because they're serving kosher food, we're going to make an exception because it's under religious auspices. So you'd have a whole nightmare of, calling traditional Jewish practice bigotry is a great way to demonize our community. And
Yeah.
that's a slippery slope that we don't want to go down.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, which is already going on in California, is the prison system. Prison system is all about getting people to restart, rehabilitation, etc. Well, a lot of women end up in the prison system because they ended up in crime because of trauma they experienced from men.
Yeah.
And that's, and profoundly influences the women's prison population. A lot of them are there because they were hurt by men. You put a biological man in their room and tell him deal with it, that's disgraceful. I'm sorry, it's just wrong. It's morally wrong, and nobody seems to be standing up against it, except again the patriarchal rabbis.
What's
Oh,
interesting to me about, what you're saying is that this coalition of Jewish values, it's really pro women with what you're talking about. Whereas it's often thought of as the Orthodox community not being pro women. When you think about this, it's really about being pro women.
but that is also prejudice of people that don't know and have an opinion.
Yeah.
It's all.
No, that's very true. I mean, Coalition for Jewish Values is very much into, belief in the power of women and empowering women, and we've had women in many positions throughout our organization. Our director of research at the present time is a woman. The director of our operations is a woman. We had a woman representing us in Washington, D.C. for a while. Certainly we've had a number of college interns who were women. There's no belief in our system that women shouldn't be empowered. It just happens to be that the rabbinic board is going to be comprised of rabbis. Surprise, surprise. That's the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny how you say that, the way it works. And that is a choice. And well, I think a lot of problems also come of the denial of our ethnicity, right? Because like with the DEI and all other issues or other whatever theories, it's suddenly like it's only a religion. I mean, we are the white because of that, we are white colonizers, let alone that there are so many of us are not so white at all. But it's like so not wanting to see. I mean, the whole Holocaust was an ethnicity war first. Even if you had only one Jewish grandparent, you could already be on the list. And it had nothing to do if you ever went to the shul or not, right?
You may remember it was a year or two ago that Whoopi Goldberg said that the
Yes.
Holocaust wasn't
Right.
about race.
Yeah.
If
Exactly.
she had denied bigotry against any other minority group, she would not be on the air today.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The double standard against Jews is
Yeah.
is outstanding. It is exemplified in that it has helped the normalization of anti-Semitism tremendously. We are less than a century from the Holocaust, in which Jews specifically were massacred due to being of a different race.
Yeah.
So don't tell us about how it
Yeah.
wasn't about race or how Jews are white or Jews having white privilege is one of the most bigoted inversions of reality. You know, the Arab world has a lot of experience with bigotry and persecution, 98% of it on the giving side. And today, you have an entire community, for example, in Deal, New Jersey, and in Brooklyn, you have communities of Syrian Jews who were expelled from Syria by violent Arab mobs.
Yeah.
And yet, when those Syrian Arabs come, their descendants come to America today, we are told they are Arabs, they are people of color, they are persecuted, they need to step up. Whereas the Jews who ended up in America a generation ago because they were expelled by these people's parents and grandparents, they have white privilege.
Yeah.
This sort of racist mythology
Yeah.
is a reversal of everything Martin Luther King stood for.
Yeah.
It is all about judging people by their skin color and putting Jews in the wrong category. Today, you have the National Education Association declaring that we're going to commemorate Black Heritage Month and Black History Month. We're going to have American, Asian American, and Pacific Islander Month. But they debate, and nearly half the group doesn't want to commemorate Jewish American Heritage Month. And they voted to exclude the Anti-Defamation League and any information about anti-Semitism from their curricula.
Yes.
That means that the average educator in America today, educating people's kids, is quite likely to be an anti-Semitic bigot.
Yes.
Who cannot be trusted to teach reality.
Yeah.
You look at the college campuses, it's not just about Harvard or Columbia.
No.
Mentioned that I'm a graduate of Princeton. I say that's a fact of which I used to be proud. Because you look at Princeton under Chris Eisgruber today, and it's all about standing up against the U.S. government when the government demands that you not allow anti-Semites to run amok on campus. And but the problem isn't just the students, it's the anti-Semitism baked in the curriculum.
Yeah.
You can't find a course about Palestine and Israel that isn't prefaced on bigotry, that isn't built upon an anti-Semitic hateful narrative. You can go to the Wikipedia today and read the article about Zionism, which says that Israel was an intent, the Zionism was a dream of an Israel with a lot of Jews and as few Arabs as possible. That is a racist inversion of reality and what went on in the Middle East. It's simply disgusting. And that sort of racism now permeates Wikipedia, and people think it's a reliable resource. It's not. It's a resource for racism.
I heard that they're sued because they locked information that has been like changed 10,000 times or so in Wikipedia. You understand who did that to make it like this. And now it's closed. They locked. You cannot edit anymore. And there's a group of lawyers suing Wikipedia for that situation because I just read it just the day before. And again, it's just horrible.
Well, they've had, there's a manipulation of Wikipedia going on. In fact, at Harvard, I mean, it is like something about the honesty and integrity here. They discovered that a group of students at Harvard in a tech lab where they were supposed to be, learning how to use these tools and updating, they all updated the sites of the pages about the law firms that were suing Harvard. to
Oh,
deliver negative propaganda and to propagandize what was being said and slant the narrative. It has nothing to do with delivering facts. It has to do with delivering preferred narrative. And that's where all this racism and stupidity is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. It's extremely disconcerting. It's terrible. I find it very, very shocking where we are today and what came out of
We
everything.
allowed this to go on for decades.
Yeah.
10 years ago, I was teaching about anti-Semitism and the growth of how it was growing on campuses under this ridiculous inversion of history called the Palestine narrative.
Yeah.
You know, the PLO, that a Palestinian means an Arab.
Yeah.
How many Arabs were in Palestine when the Palestinian Talmud was written? Right? Go all through history. There are people whose Jewish families that lived in Haifa for 800 years. The Piamenta family, the famous musician, just read an article about him, 17th generation Jerusalemite. I just met a direct descendant of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Code of Jewish Law, who
Yeah.
lived in Sfat.
Mhm.
You know, we know that a Palestinian for 2,000 years meant a Jew. From, again, the Palestinian Talmud all the way through Palestinian Airlines, Miss Palestine, and the Palestinian soccer team. All of them
And the
were
orchestra,
Jews.
the Palestinian orchestra was in
The Palestinian orchestra.
1936.
Because Palestine was nothing more than a Greco-Roman colonialist moniker for the homeland of the Jews.
Yeah.
So talk about colonialism. Let's talk about indigenous terminology. Arabs can't even pronounce Palestine in their native tongue. You want to have a conversation about Arabs in Israel? Stop using colonialist names. Let's talk about indigenous names. We've got a lot of indigenous names for that land. We've got Canaan, Judea, Samaria, land flowing with milk and honey, promised land, holy land. I'm up to 7 different names, all of which are indigenous to the region. And by the way, none of them support the so-called Palestinian cause.
No, that's
and
another
the
thing.
tragedy about this is that there's so little knowledge about all of this. You know, these kids from Harvard and, you know, these Ivy League schools, they haven't got a clue. It's shocking.
I mean, Princeton Alumni Weekly, apparently at commencement speech, the president, Chris Eisgruber, declares, students have to learn independence in their knowledge. Well, they're not learning independent knowledge at Princeton. They're learning indoctrination. There's a preferred knowledge, there's a preferred narrative, and it doesn't matter if reality contradicts it entirely. There's a reason why the Palestinian Authority declared it offensive. When the head of the United Nations, Guterres, who's no friend of the Jewish community, no friend of Israel, admitted, maybe this is why, because early in his career, he said no one can deny that that's the site of the Jews' holy temple. Palestinian Authority declared that an offense to the Palestinian people. That's the story right there.
Wow.
If you're not willing to lie, if you're not willing to rewrite reality, you're not with the Palestinian cause. In order to be with the Palestinian cause, you have to be willing to lie and slander the Jews. And that's what we see news agencies doing every day.
Yeah. And a lot of Jews are joining that too, that behavior.
I like to comment on that
Yeah.
the notion that all Jews are intelligent is an anti-Semitic trope.
Yeah. and they're not true, an untruth.
Look, I think that it requires a certain level of stupidity to claim that you know anti-Semitism better than the guys who've been doing it for 3,000 years.
Yeah.
And when I say that, it's because, I mean, my gosh, I won't quote you a source on anti-Semitism that isn't 100 years old, unless it's Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who was speaking outside the United States, was not related to American politics, and because he knows those books better than I do.
Okay, yeah, he was fantastic. He was fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, it's I respond to that often, that some Jews lost some brain parts, because to me the logic is like, you don't know the history, fine, but don't talk then. Shut Shut your mouth closed. Keep your mouth
And
closed.
an informed opinion requires you be informed.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So you want to
Minor
spout your
details.
nonsense and stupidities, spare us. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, and they do so much damage too. Okay, so how do you actually do your mission? How do you tell your messages? Well, I hear how you do that, but how do you reach out? What's your
Well, we do a lot of interviews, as you know. Just
mm-hmm,
doing this podcast is an example of that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But we're on the cable channels a great deal
Yeah.
for an organization of still relatively new, young, our side. But we're also very well known in Congress,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it's sad that it has become a partisan thing. You have congressmen who are so, even if they'll argue with us on some issues, are on us, with us on others. Like, the ultra liberal John Fetterman and Richie
Mm-hmm.
Torres as
Right.
examples. But you also have guys who are just stem to stern. They are on, in our corner. And that actually begins with Mike Johnson's office as Speaker of the House of Representatives. I mean, here's a guy who lives, values, and believes in the Jewish community. Some of it may be what's best politically, but obviously it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got members of that caucus that are just fire. You actually have people on the Democratic side who are fire. Many of them Jewish. Jared Moskowitz, who obviously they could be pushing. Why are we tolerating bigots in our caucus? But they're still trying to do the right thing. So
Mm-hmm.
we recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Gottheimer. Of course, there's people like Mike Lawler who are just excellent and then you move to the Senate side and you've got people like, James Langford and Jim Thune himself is very interested in pushing traditional values and promoting the Jewish life in America. These are people who are good for us.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
How has the response been to what you've been doing, like with the podcast and whatever
Well,
else you?
it really depends. When the head of the ADL is upset with me for criticizing the ADL, I know I'm doing well. you know, uh, because if we weren't doing well, he'd be ignoring us. No, he's good and offended because we're right. You know, Politicizing the fight against anti-Semitism is not good for anybody. So, you have to play it straight. And so we criticize where criticism is due and praise where praise is due. Obviously, for a lot of the Jewish community, I've got to say, it's come across to people as a breath of fresh air. That there's a lot of people today who are used to giving to certain Jewish causes and now regret ever having supported those organizations and those people because of what they've turned out to be today,
Yeah.
that they moved in profoundly different directions than what the people were promised. That's true to a certain extent of the ADL. It's certainly true of the Hebrew, what used to be called the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which is now just HIAS and primarily seems to be devoted to bringing in Muslims who hate Jews to America, which is not actually good for our community. But even the left wing religious movements, the new denominations founded, in Germany in the 1800s, have turned out to be horrible in terms of their advocacy against the interests of the Jewish community.
Yeah. Such as
I'm
J
just
Street.
wondering, yeah, J Street. I'm just wondering if you've managed, as far as you know, to convert any of the reform rabbis who have aligned themselves with a lot of the issues, like, for example, men in women's sports, and been on that side of things. Do you think, are you aware of any inroads that you've made with them?
I wouldn't say that we have converted. I don't know that, I don't know that that's happened directly through us. I know that there are reform rabbis who got their head on straight with regards to at least some of these issues and who have been very supportive of us, at least behind the scenes, to say, you guys are doing great things. There are a few who've actually introduced us to congregations of theirs, and that's obviously very helpful
Yeah.
because we're not here about you know bad mouthing with other movements. It's like, well, obviously we believe that everybody should be observant, and we walk the walk on Judaism. But for those who are not traditional, but they have their values in the right place, we want them to have a home here. We want it to be something where, they have a place at the table. But honestly, some of the best work we do is simply pushing back because these left-wing groups have claimed to represent the entire Jewish community and to represent Judaism. When you think about the founding values of this country, the founding fathers called it Judeo-Christian ethics. That's
Yeah.
not supposed to be a war. It's actually values that Christians got from us. That's why they call
Yeah.
them Judeo-Christian. So
Yeah.
why should they only hear from Jews who are telling them they're wrong? They should hear from Jews who believe that they are at least moving in the right direction and largely have it right. Certainly, some of these reform organizations, we're the ones who are very anxious to call them out, and we have the ability to say, look, they don't have a traditional education. They don't really know what they're doing. They don't, by traditional standards, none of their rabbis are rabbis. So, how is it that we're listening to them as religious leaders while not listening to those who genuinely have the education credentials necessary? I don't consider myself by any stretch of the imagination a leading Orthodox rabbi. These are people who have learned, I don't reach their ankles in Jewish education. But if we're saying what they believe, if we're articulating their beliefs, then we know we're going in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. Well, having that said, I think we reach a little bit the end of our conversation, and we end always with sharing our concern about a Jew hater or Jew hated organizations. So, and then we follow up with the good stories. So, Rachel, may I ask you, who is your anti-Semite of this week or a group?
Now, I chose Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's the Republican from Georgia, because she called for the halting of further aid to Israel, which she refers to as a nuclear armed Israel. So she's among a number of right wing figures who have been critical of US support for Israel. And there are many, many on the left, and there are some on the right as well. So she was my choice.
Yeah, thank you. Rabbi.
I think that there are many on the left and some on the right. I agree with that. I don't actually think Marjorie Taylor Greene is our most dangerous. I mean, you've got Tucker Carlson, his tremendous audience. You've got Candace Owens, and even within Congress, you have Thomas Massie, who is more genuinely unfriendly across the board. Marjorie Taylor Greene is some of her comments are definitely lean into anti-Semitism. Some of it could be explained through isolationism. Like I don't think Rand Paul is actually anti-Semitic. He's just very, oh, America should worry about America. He doesn't realize that allowing a nuclear Iran is going to be a problem for America in very short order. The fact that Israel may or may not, they've never admitted that they have nuclear weapons. Everybody seems to think that MTG is right about that. But do we want to put Israel in a position where Israel's going to use those nuclear weapons? I don't think that's good for anybody. I certainly don't think that's good for world peace or human rights or any of the things that we're leaning into here. So she's definitely doing it wrong. But for a leading anti-Semite, I would have to go for Ilhan Omar. And why is she dangerous? Because in the most recent form, she called for Netanyahu to be arrested rather than platformed in America. She called him a war criminal, needs to be investigated for war crimes. What's his war crime? For prosecuting a war against a genocidal terror organization that started the war, hides behind civilians, and Israel makes the most effort to avoid civilian casualties of any first world army. Yeah. And yet is routinely accused of the very thing, for example, being genocidal, that is actually true of its enemies, to cover for the enemies. And she's a part of that. Yeah. Sadly, what happened was there's one representative, a Jewish representative named Randy Fine, who started wearing a kippah because of Jewish students. Not that he's particularly observant, but because he feels if Jewish students are afraid to wear their kippah, then I'm going to wear one for them in the halls of Congress. And he's the guy who said to Ilhan Omar, look, I bet it upsets you that Netanyahu has killed so many of your fellow Muslim terrorists because she is, in fact, a terror supporter.
Yeah.
The sad thing is that Democratic leadership immediately stood up for her,
Yeah.
called it racism and Islamophobia, that Randy Fine would call out her support for radical Islamic terrorism as if he was the bigot rather than the victim of her bigotry, as are all Jews.
That is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Leading anti-Semite for the week.
Yeah, well, that's for me for many years already.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. I have a different one as an article in the New York Times. No, not in the New York Times, in the Times of Israel, sorry. Written by Rabbi Rachel Goldenberg and 4 colleagues. Why they vote for Mamdani as mayor of New York. I don't know why I confused those cities. I find it so despicable because I read it, right, entirely. And I noticed that those people are not on social media. They have no clue what he has said in the past when he was still not politically so correct as today. And they say even this, very confusing, he shows that he has Jewish values, right? Because he is so for justice and he wants, Israel can exist, but he compares even the situation with Gaza as an uprising and worse.
He's actually never said that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state.
That
he's never condemned globalize the Intifada, which of course is a call for violence.
This is my story, that he actually is supporting the global Intifada idea and justifies it and compares it to the Ghetto of Warsaw uprising. And in addition to that, he's also a BDS supporter. So all his comments that have been caught by people that are on social media, among others, I am, and Rachel and more of us, you see that it's all there. And they come with a beautiful story, like how the feelings of justice from Judaism. 5 people. And
it is, as you said,
despicable.
they have to have knowledge before they mouth off. Otherwise, they're just dumb. As you know, that's my line, that this notion that all Jews are intelligent is an anti-Semitic trope, because you get in the Jewish community, and by the way, there's an example. You can look on Times of Israel, and there are several responses written by their fellow Reform rabbis saying, this is nonsense. You have it completely backwards. You don't know what you're talking about. Certainly anybody with a solid Jewish education knows that they're simply idiots. And they're being Mamdani's useful idiots because the man is actually an anti-Semite.
Yes.
And in a very, very vile and dangerous way. And the fact that that New York is contemplating electing such a person to be their mayor really says something about where American society, the inflection point that we are at. Someone said it would be good for America for him to get elected, because then the rest of America will see how bad that is. But you don't need to wait for that. Look at California. Look how pathetically they are doing when they declare socialist policies. Now San Francisco isn't a city anybody wants to live in. There's a reason for that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, you had a nice addition to my story. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. It opens the box of Pandora. I get it. I get it. Okay, now we go to the hero or heroes or heroines of the week. Rachel.
I have to go into a little bit of the background of my choice. The anti-Semitic British rap punk group called Bob Vylan, Vylan, ironically named after the Jewish artist Bob Dylan. So Bob Vylan is very anti-Semitic, and at a music festival in Glastonbury, England, he recently shouted, "Death to the IDF," and death to every IDF soldier, which includes Christian, Druze, and Muslim soldiers. So it's like to all of them. So this ignorant, hateful guy was chanting these things. And of course, the idea is to influence the concert goers. And some of them were free, free Palestine, which is also what he was saying. And so my heroes are, as a result of what he did, he got his U.S. visa canceled. The people who managed the concert venues canceled his tour dates. So they're my heroes. They effectively, he destroyed his own career. He ended his own career with his hateful comments. And so they did the right thing by standing up and canceling him. So that was my...
And the irony is that he will probably blame the Jews for canceling his career. That's how it works. No, that's how it works.
But he's
That's
finished.
the logic.
He's finished.
Really blame us for that. But anyway, Rabbi.
Well, it's interesting when the Jews responsible are people like Marco Rubio, Leo Terrell, Harmeet Dillon. I mean, these are not, by no standards, are they Jewish, except that they believe that Jews should have civil rights. And that's, but yeah, it's blame the Jews for everything. You know what? I would probably agree with those same heroes. I think that there's so many of them. The congressmen who stand up, when Jews like Code Pink are accusing people in the hall, and you have congressmen, whether it's Randy Weber, Andy Ogles, Brian Mast, standing up to these people. That is real heroism. Just, John Fetterman standing up on the roof with flying an Israeli flag in the face of these protesters outside his house. You have heroes in every part of government who are committed like that to doing the right thing. And as Rachel said, people like Leo Terrell, Harmeet Dillon, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, denying the visas. These are people who are really devoted to fighting anti-Semitism and deserve, if we're going to talk about, who's an anti-Semite and who's acting against it, these people all deserve a lot of credit.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I have a different group. I want to dedicate my respect and honor and appreciation for all the women in Israel that deal with this extremely stressful situation, that they have their sons in the army or their husbands and they still make their families going on and dealing with the extremely long taking stress for almost 2 years now, and keep their families sane and are helping to continue to live in the way they do, which must be very, very, very hard because of all the grief and all the stress. So I dedicate it to them.
Very nice.
Well, thank you so very much, Rabbi. It was a real pleasure and a lot to learn from too, which is great. We are very grateful that you showed up with this wonderful story about your organization and the coalition. We totally support it. And thank you so much for being there today with us, and all the best.
Thank you so much. People can join us at cjvalues.org, find out more about us, subscribe, and of course, donate. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great. In the description will be that information.
Great.
Okay, of course, we support that. Thank you so very much.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
We have a small request, and you probably know what it is about, but we have this very interesting situation that 91% of our returning viewers do not subscribe, but they are returning, so they must like it. And that would be great if that is you, if you will be so kind to subscribe, eventually leave a like if you like the video, or even leave a comment, that's even nicer, or have a request. That would be great to hear from you, but please support our work by subscribing. Thank you so very much. That would be such a favor to us.